Ready? All right. Welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead for white lightning straight on your brain. Not literal white lightning, because that would be breaking the law. We would never do that.
No, but we are going to have some smoked bourbon, which I'm going to be working on while we introduce our topics today.
We're gonna have something to do goulash today. There will probably be some themes, hence the I Miss Abe t-shirt from the Abraham Lincoln Museum in Springfield, Illinois. Great place to go.
And we all know size matters.
And this is also true. So, especially when it comes to the hardness of old school NES. Anyway. So,
Size, hardness. Damn.
You know what? I think we should start with this first because some people have commented on / complained about how it sounds like we're always agreeing.
Oh yeah.
There's a reason for that. That ties into some things that's actually going on in the news. Because we share values and principles, and the radicals of today, especially the radicals in charge in big tech and the media and academia and politics, are just insane. Some of them quite literally, I think, insane. Uh-oh, did you break your thingy?
I think I broke the thingy.
Uh-oh, don't break your thingy. Break the tip off, that's gonna hurt.
I did break the tip off. Well, son of a. Well, let me go get just a regular fire then. So we're not going to get to use the awesome torch because I broke my butane. I broke the tip off. Okay, well, let me go get a regular one. You keep giving the intro.
Okay, so one of the problems with, and I've talked about this, that this is where I started to shift politically and was a lot less concerned with getting into political debates and winning than just trying to get the people on the other side, the people who disagreed with me, friends on Facebook or whatever, that just to get them to acknowledge that there was another side, a legitimate side, even if you disagreed with it. There was a rational side to the other side. Eventually I came to realize that we don't share values and principles. So me and Sam can disagree amicably on abortion or last time on Ukraine, because we have the same basic principle of USA, bring the leg drop Hulk Hogan, but then how? What's the best way to go forward with our foreign policy? What's the best way to present ourselves overseas? And what's the best way to project our military force? But if I'm coming from the perspective of the woke crazy of the US is historically awesome and is entirely based off of colonial white patriarchy and oppression, how are we going to have a logical discussion on foreign policy? Because we're not even coming from the same place. And that ties into a lot of the Rogan stuff that's going on right now, a lot of the craziness there. Which reminded me of something I heard like years ago. I don't remember how many years ago. May come as a surprise to some people, but Glenn Beck and Penn Jillette are actually fairly good friends. So super conservative, religious Glenn Beck and super libertarian atheist Penn Jillette, because they share similar values. And Beck, for a good while, when he started to get to know Penn Jillette, was hung up on the stuff that libertarians and conservatives really disagree on, which was the prostitution and drug stuff. And finally, Penn Jillette said, Glenn, we are so far away from that mattering. This is just an intellectual exercise. Because by the time we actually get past where we are now and to the point where that prostitution and drug stuff really matters and could really something we talk about as an actual policy rather than just as a point of intellectual debate. You know, it's going to be our grandkids arguing about this stuff. That's how far removed we are from a point where we can talk about some of these issues. That's in large part why it sounds like we're agreeing so much, because we're talking about the crazies who have gone crazy. And
well, it's kind of the debate where you see a lot of this, and again, we'll go back to the Joe Rogan thing, is I had seen a kind of a breakdown of all the left and right that went on Joe Rogan and how he's skewed to the right. And people on that were labeled as right were people like Russell Brand.
yeah,
If anybody thinks Russell Brand is a right winger, then I don't even know what to tell you at this point. It's so far off. What is the truth? He's kind of well, Joe Rogan himself is a Bernie Sanders guy. If you really want to attach a political party, sorry, I'm trying to smoke this bourbon. And apparently the torch actually makes a difference because this is not working very well.
It is not. It is taking a good long while to light up there.
Well, it said less wood makes more smoke. Pay attention, ladies. But that didn't work, so I had to add some more wood.
good.
Let's see if we can get this going.
Well, that is something I've been thinking for a while before you even showed me this stupid meme, this list that you got from Get Set, you posted it. And it's just absurd, the tiny left list and the huge right list. I'm looking at these names going, seriously? You're gonna call those people right leaning? You're gonna call those conservatives? Some of them, yeah, were right leaning, but the point is that Bill Maher has suddenly become conservative. He's still the guy that wrote and produced the documentary Religulous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's still the same guy, but he's trying to course correct his own side. That's how insane, how far radicalized the woke have become.
This isn't the smartest thing, but I think it's working. Yeah, so when we're trying to, well, he's kind of taking that route with why it seems like we don't fight, or why we go along the same path. But the direction I want to go with it is sometimes people kind of confuse the fact that we don't fight about things and we always steel man each other with the fact that we're on the same side, which is no, we're just giving each other intellectual respect. Respect is the word, realistically. He's somebody trying to bring around his point of view, and I'm trying to bring around my point of view. And, you know, sometimes they match, sometimes they're a little off, but we don't shout at each other and we don't try to, did it do anything?
I smell a little bit there.
A little bit. But we're not, I guess, hating it on each other in the process. In fact, Heath's kind of mannerism I've noticed in the last episode is he'll shake his head yes to all the things in what I say that he does kind of follow along with, but then immediately come back with that yeah, but
And also, well, you know, because very few things are black and white. I mean, really the only thing you can reliably rely on to be black and white is mathematics. The answer is the answer or it's not.
Well, and this is where we're kind of like-minded on is the crazy opposing side doesn't even think mathematics can be that objective.
Exactly. That's why I bring it up, because 2 + 2 equals, well, it depends. Are you part of an oppressed group or not?
Yeah.
And so just because I wouldn't have said it that way, or I disagree with where he's putting his emphasis, it doesn't mean he's wrong. It doesn't mean, you're a godless heathen traitor who hates America. That's crap. And it is absolutely no way to.
Well, I'm not a traitor that hates America, but
There's absolutely no way to advance anything. I mean, it's not a way to advance friendship, let alone neighborliness, even if we weren't friends since we were in high school. It's not a way to advance neighborliness, you know, that's not a way, that's no way to get along with an acquaintance, let alone a friend. So come on, people.
okay, what subjects did we want to cover?
Well, the one I'm starting off with was the Rogan crap, because it's still going on and it's still ridiculous. But I do have, there is a part of me that's really grumpy and cranky and wants to say I told you so.
Okay.
Because this goes right into you have to share values and principles, and then you can disagree amicably, but then you can at least see where the other side is coming from. So, for instance, when we were talking earlier, I brought up I'm still grumpy and annoyed at all the conservatives who say, well, you know, the gay marriage issue, we've lost that, we can concede that. No, I think I contend you can draw a straight line from what was being said by conservatives about gay marriage, and it wasn't religious. I listened to all of the oral arguments on both of the big Supreme Court cases. Not a single person cited scripture. I never did when I was debating with people. You can draw a line from there to minor attracted person, because there was never a limiting principle. I did not say that homosexuals are the same as pedophiles. That's stupid. No one at the time, well, I shouldn't say no one, I'm sure some lunatic idiot somewhere did say it, but that wasn't what was being said. What was being said is, what is your limiting principle? If you're going to redefine marriage that for the whole of human history has been this thing to something else, okay, well, how do you keep from redefining it further? What is your limiting principle? Because we couldn't have an adult conversation about it, here we are. Now we have chest feeding people instead of breastfeeding mothers. Now we have minor attracted persons. Now you can get married to your cat.
Well, and when you look at from the left, whereas I would have head over heels kind of defended the gay marriage side of it. And this is kind of a rehashing of a conversation we had earlier, and we're like, we better just get on film. Hooligans, kids these days. But where I come from, my perspective, and I think this is somewhere along the lines of where someone like Bill Maher would also come from, is, I'm not going to speak for him, but I'm just hypothetically speaking that this is my what I think he would say, is it's kind of an anger of the fact that we had to argue against the slippery slope at that time. And it was, no, these people, homosexuality has a biological component to it. Yes, it is natural in one way or another. Why are we politicizing marriage to begin with? And they should be allowed to have these certain rights, which we normally are only afforded to people who have this signed piece of paper, such as visiting your loved ones in the hospital, or kind of your will and everything. And the argument from the other side was always that extreme down the hill. Well, if you let this happen, this is going to happen, and then pedophilia, and then you're going to erase marriage, and all of these things. And we were fighting for a certain thing that wasn't all those things. But now we got that, and we won that battle. And then on the flip side of it, all of those things are coming about. And so it's almost another fight to say, hey, we wanted to do this certain thing that was right, but it's been hijacked and piggybacked on and by something that is not, that by something that actually kind of pushes reality to the side.
Too much of the country has become the dude at the party who goes too far and then just ruins the mood for it. And that was, and my point being, so then imagine if when we were having the debate in the first place, more people would have recognized what that fringe was, and we could have just ignored them and had the debate among the adults, because how much more progress just in general could we have made if more and more prominent voices on the pro-gay marriage side were making that point, and then more and more prominent voices on the right could have said, okay, well, we can go along with that just in general, even if we don't agree on gay marriage in particular, we can go along with that in general. So now let's talk about where we think government is too intrusive in our lives, and maybe we can have a trade-off here where you think government should be involved in marriage in the first place. I think government should be involved in this thing that maybe you think it is, but maybe we can find some common ground there and scale things back. And now all of a sudden we have a freer society as a whole.
Well, and I think that's part of the point. This is something we kind of agree on for different reasons, because it's the original argument was the government get out of my personal business. But now we've reached a point in the argument where if we were to keep going down that slope, the government needs to get involved to impose that position. And I think that's where we find the sweet spot of where we can kind of negotiate that realm is how much does freedom give us? What is natural? What kind of blends with our general values, the values we share? Whereas when we step outside of the bonds of the values we share, that's when government has to impose it. Because if we step outside of those bounds, someone's going to not want that to happen. And so you need a body to come in and force that group of people to go along with how it is, how it's being presented. So now there's always going to be someone that doesn't want the extreme religious right is never going to be happy with gay marriage. If you actually truly believe from a religious standpoint, from a dogmatic standpoint, I should say, that gay marriage is wrong, gay sex is wrong, even having gay thoughts is wrong, there's no way I can compromise with you. But all of us in the middle of that bell curve, there is a range of, hey, what does freedom allow us? And when you get outside of that range, then it has to be a government authority, whether it's Handmaid's Tale or what we have going on right now, right? And that's where it becomes that kind of that point where even someone on the left needs to say, hey, whoa, pump the brakes, because this is how far we got with what nature brought us and what freedom brought us. And now we're going down a road that leads to authoritarianism, which whether you're left or right, I think most of the world can agree that that's not where we want to go.
Well, and that's kind of where the grumpy old man wants to say, I told you so, because I mentioned this when one of our first, if not the first episode, one of the first, where Rush Limbaugh had just died. And I talked about his influence on me, on some of his legacy, on his treatment by the media. And what's going on with Rogan isn't new at all. They tried to do it to Rush Limbaugh, but because the wokeness hadn't, now you've studied it more. The CRT stuff goes way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it goes back to the 70s, is it?
Oh, it goes back before that. It was being written in response to the fascist movements in Germany.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah,
I couldn't remember how far back its roots went.
Now the big publications were 60s and 70s, and in the States would be, you know, people like Bell Hooks and Kimberly Crenshaw would be 80s and 90s. So it does go way back, but that's been permeating for a while.
It was making its march through the institutions, and it hadn't made itself to the culture at large yet.
Well, and it depends on what point in history you were, because some of these same philosophical ideals were actually adopted by people like Hitler. So he was a big fan of Karl Marx, for instance, which a lot of people are like, oh my, no, it can't be true because he was a fascist. That's a capitalist. Well, no, he was a socialist. He was a socialist. Mussolini was a socialist. But he also adopted the writings of Hegel, which had kind of a slightly different bend to it, which was, you're going kind of down that eugenic route where there's a certain type of people that deserve this. Again, we talked about Mussolini last time. It's a little bit more clear cut of an example.
Yeah, Hitler went that route, and Mussolini's route towards fascism was more the history and the majesty of the Roman Empire and wanting to bring that back. That's where he took the ideals of socialism, Marxism, but then made it nationalistic to instill pride in the Italian people and, instantly get power for himself.
Yeah, and Mussolini's the easiest example because he went from a socialist to a fascist in one step.
Yes.
And that was figuring out it wasn't workers of the world unite, it was workers of Italy unite. And he realized that the Italians had this nationalistic kind of bend to them, and he could put those two together, and that's the missing piece. That's why the other thing wasn't working. And it works if you have another common identity. And we've got the origins of identity politics. It was just a nationalist thing versus a skin color thing, or a sexuality thing. So it's a really clear example of how that old school thought can be taken and hijacked. Again, it was, being Italian's cool until it's not,
Well, and that's what happened in Germany, is that they took that next step. Well, it's not just Germany for Germans, or it's not just Germany versus everyone else. It's we Germans are a specific and superior race, and we're going to invent this mythology to support that, and we're going to create this boogie, the main boogeyman of the Jews, but then also other boogeymen, the Slavs, the Gypsies, the mentally and physically handicapped, and other things. So we're gonna create these boogeymen of the impure, the unclean. And we are a special race, not just, it was building on the nationalism. It was, this is why we are nationalistically so much better than everybody else.
Well, and we got a little bit of projection here. And I heard something interesting the other day, that fascism never exists without communism being there first. And fascism is the autoimmune response to the virus of communism. When they kind of have so much in common. And so it was the rise of communism in 1930s Germany that brought along someone like Hitler. And it was the anti-communist movement that gave him the power that he needed. And then he just got this crazy idea in his head that Jews are communists. And
well, it was because there was a couple of things. One of the ways they were able to do this is there were some prominent Bolsheviks that were Jews, completely ignoring the fact of all of the Jews, especially Ukrainian Jews, that were persecuted and purged in the Soviet Union. Let's ignore that because it gets in the way of our agenda. But then also the Bolshevism itself, the way the communists rose to power in Russia, scared the crap out of the rest of Europe. In a lot of ways, it was basically what happened with the French Revolution. Is the monarchists kind of created an autoimmune response, to use your terminology, against the Republicans, small r Republicans, because of the insanity, the bloodiness of the French Revolution, the chaos it created. It kind of reinforced all of these traditional monarchies, and I'm getting off in nerdiness here, but in a lot of ways you could say it's what led to World War I, but I digress. The point being, that's one of the reasons we have the Gulag Archipelago up there, because these kinds of regimes can't exist with any kind of pushback or pressure, because we use the analogy what we were talking about here was this with Wheel of Time talk, because we were talking about Perrin, but I talked about the difference between steel that is strong and iron that is hard. It's very hard, it's very hard to break, but if you hit it with the right amount of force, it will shatter because it's brittle, which seems contradictory, but that's the structure of the metal. Whereas steel is a little more malleable, has a little more bend to it, and so it doesn't shatter. It will bend, it will warp a little bit, but it won't shatter because it's not as brittle.
Well, I seasoned a skillet earlier today, and one of the things you never do when you heat it up to season it is after you've baked it at 400 for so long with the grease and everything, don't ever throw it in cold water, because it's gonna blow up. It's gonna crack, and so cold water can destroy an iron skillet like that. But if something like steel, you will actually quench it in cold water to make it harder, to make it more well, not harder, but more durable. So it is a big difference. I'm going to double back a little bit to what I saw, the projection. What did we hear so much through the Trump era was he's fascist, right? He's fascist. He's going to be the next Hitler. He's literally Hitler, right? And that came from the side that actually knows the history of where their side comes from. And they know it's going to be eventually, if they push far enough, a literally Hitler that comes into power. And that's, again, why people like myself on the left need to fight that part of the left, because we don't want a literal Hitler to come along, right? We're fighting that extreme reaction to it just as much as we're fighting the extreme part of our own party. And fighting the extreme part of your own party prevents the other. You want a handmaid's tale? This is how you do it. You push too far to where everybody's fed up with you that they go so far the other direction. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you go so far left that it becomes out of control, the only answer is something that far right. And that's why someone like Bill Maher is so influential. Someone like Joe Rogan is so important, because they are one part of the process that keeps a literal Hitler from coming back again.
And it's where, on our random tangents and socking back, it's why I'm so grumpy and I say I told you so, because that's why it's so important that one of the most repulsive people in modern culture right now to me is Alex Jones. He shouldn't have been deplatformed. It was wrong, and it has led to evil, and I don't use that word lightly. And to that point, when people try to get Rush Limbaugh off the air, or Glenn Beck off the air, or this isn't new. What's happening to Rogan isn't new if you're a capital C conservative political nerd and have been paying attention to how often this has been tried against prominent conservatives. And right now, Rogan's being called a conservative. He was on, you look at that stupid list of people he's had on his show, he's being called a conservative. He's not, for crying out loud.
I might have to get that list up so everybody can see it.
He's not a conservative, for crying out loud, but what he is prominent. If you can suppress Rogan, then you can suppress schmucks like us. You can suppress anybody, because he is the godfather of podcasting. Okay, he's got, what is it, tens of millions of views, on average. So if you can suppress him, you can suppress anybody. And it is curious, is it not, that the narrative shifted so fast from vaccine misinformation or COVID misinformation to now he's a racist. Well, wait a minute. If he was giving out misinformation on COVID, and that was so important because it's literally people's health, then why did we suddenly shift to racism? Why aren't we still talking about this? Because is it this important that people get to know the right information, get to know the true information? Oh, yeah. Tulsi Gabbard, that was on the list. Oy vey. Freaking Democrat presidential candidate, and she's suddenly a conservative now because she's saying, hey, why are we being this extreme?
Here we go.
Here we go. Joe Rogan's right-wing bias.
Let me just save the picture so I can make it big for the okay.
Then I want you to go back to the actual tweet because I was just reading what that moron said and oof.
Okay, so we'll bring up the list first. Share screen. Okay, for those, and this has been going around the social media's webs. It says guest bias. So everybody on the left is obviously left wing, and everybody on the right is supposedly right wing. The ones I want to point out. Whoops, sorry, let me turn that off. The ones I want to point out are Russell Brand. He's apparently a right winger now. Heather Heying, pretty progressively left. Sam Harris, who basically got himself excommunicated from what was called the intellectual dark web because he was so far left with his Trump derangement system that syndrome that he was even pushing those lefties away from him to pushing himself further left. Steven Pinker, freaking philosopher from Canada, gay man that also was completely anti-Trump. Gad Sad, somewhere in the middle. Michael Shermer, lefty philosopher. Brett Weinstein, progressive lefty, Occupy Wall Street. He was a professor at freaking Evergreen State University, which is just to be even considered for that, you have to be so far left you can even fill out their application.
To put Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris on the same list, it just illustrates the absurdity of this, I think.
Peter Boghossian, University of Portland professor, ethics, philosophy, very left. But what they should have said is on the left, woke, and then not woke, which no, they couldn't because Jimmy Dore's not woke. He's very left. He's very progressive. He's very much a Bernie guy, but he's not woke. I don't know where Tommy Chong is. Crystal Ball, I actually enjoy her. She's able to give a kind of a news interview without being totally biased, except for the time I saw her interview Bernie Sanders, which she was basically
campaign spokesman.
Would it be misogynist to say she was orgasmic?
Fangirling?
No, she really was. You could see her face just kind of like went like this, and it was like she was in a different place at that moment.
It's really exciting to meet a not-socialist who owns 3 houses.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard, who was literally running for the Democratic ticket for president. Michael Malice, he's a legit complete anarchist. I mean, really, this list, first of all, it should have a middle. It shouldn't have just a right and left. It should have a left, middle, right. But even if you did left, right, it would come out even about right here if you took most of those names.
Apollo's not, he's a comedian, you douches.
Yeah. Barry Weiss wrote for was it New York Times for so many years?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just blows me away. Oh, Eric Weinstein. Do you remember watching his interview with Glenn Beck?
Yeah.
When Glenn Beck called him a conservative and he about threw his camera at him. Yeah. So it's I don't know. Okay, so you wanted me to go back to that tweet, huh?
where you saved this from.
This one.
Yep.
Okay, so that picture. Okay.
Joe Rogan fans often point to his fig leaf endorsement of Bernie Sanders as proof that Rogan isn't right wing. But right wingers overwhelmingly are his favorites, as you can see from his guest list.
Okay. Would you call endorsing the farthest left, avowed socialist, technically not even a Democrat? I feel like a lot of people don't even know that. He's technically an independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats. Endorsing him is a fig leaf? And let's just start there with the absurdity. And then moving along, okay, well, there even, let's just for the sake of argument say that yes, all of those people you put on your list as right wing are right wing. What I ranted about last time, where are the other people then? Why you think they wouldn't be on the show if they wanted to be? So because I complained about the frickin' Surgeon General complaining about Rogan's COVID misinformation on MSNBC, which gets tens of thousands of views a night, and Rogan gets tens of million views. You don't think Rogan would have the Surgeon General on his show if his people called and said, hey, we'd like to come on with Rogan, so the Surgeon General can set him straight?
You just brought up an interesting point. So sometimes you got to not look at what's there, but what's not there.
Yeah.
Notice who's not on the list. Someone we've talked about frequently as a Rogan guest. Sanjay Gupta. And why is he not on the list? Why is he not on the list, people? Because you would have to admit he's left wing, but he's supposedly an unbiased reporter, right? An unbiased advisor. Who's not on the list? Who is Rogan had on that is supposed to be by their authority over the news or whatever situation they're in that is not on that list? Because I mean, he's had close to 2,000 interviews already at this point.
I thought about that, but yeah, you're gonna put Nick DiPaolo on there, a stand-up comedian, so that you can pad out the right wing side, but you're not gonna list all of the other comedians he's had on. You're not going to list all the other newsmakers, the journalists that he's had on.
But yes, the fact that Sanjay Gupta is not on there shows you the bias of the list, because the bias of the list is not right or left wing. It's make Rogan look bad. I don't know him as a person. He seems like a pretty stand-up guy. People I trust online tell me he's a stand-up guy. I think we would probably get along if he would, stoop down to my level of hanging out. But to paint a picture that just is obviously not true. This is the power of the Rogan. So I actually got a beef with another guy that I've watched some of his stuff, Jack Murphy, and he tweeted a bunch of stuff after the Rogan thing, and it sounded like jealousy to me, really. It was a lot of, oh, this poor guy, we have to stand up for his $100 million contracts and blah, 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 blah. Just like kind of a little bit of the snarkiness we get with Colin Kaepernick, but that wasn't the point. The point was, this is the first example where the media tried to cancel someone, where 100 million people have over, at least if they're a fan, 1,000 hours of video to go by to say this is fucking bullshit. When they try to mischaracter somebody or try to drag somebody through the mud, this is the first person that has so much of a body of work that proves it otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That it's just too powerful to overcome. So it's not some actor that nobody knew their private life, and all of a sudden something comes out where they were doing this behind the scenes, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, I didn't know they were doing that." No, this is challenging his words on his podcast, which the average fan has, at least 1,000 hours of view time. And that's 100 million people. So,
And because of the nature of his media, you have the people like me who I don't listen to him regularly, but I've watched a lot of clips of him regularly. So even if I'm not a regular listener or a fan, I know the guy and I know that what you're trying to say is crap versus this shows the arrogance of the radical progressive left, because when you go after someone like Glenn Beck, you're talking about someone who is obviously self-avowed on this, a conservative. He's on the right. So everybody on the left and even most people in the middle will be like, I don't care. Whatever you're trying to do to him, you're trying to get him fired. I don't care. I'm not paying attention. Because he's got even a really successful cable news show. Really successful only means hundreds of thousands of views. And then on his AM radio show, he might have a couple of million of unique ear holes. I mean, heck, Rush Limbaugh was the most successful radio guy of all time, and he had like 20 to 30 million unique listeners.
He was bigger than Howard Stern?
Oh, yeah.
I thought Howard Stern was up there.
No, Rush was the biggest by far, and yet they tried to cancel him, and they did succeed in certain places. Like I remember back in the 90s, he got a big sponsorship deal with Florida Orange Juice, and the lefties went after them hard, and they canceled that contract because they didn't want to be associated with him. Which again, Grumpy Old Man says this isn't new, but to your point, they're really reaching hard here because they're going after someone that, for a giant chunk of the country, is going to be, who are you going to believe, me or your lying ears? Because you've heard this guy in his own words for years. And so you already know whether or not he is who they're saying he is, which is that and that. So the book in the red here, The Coddling of the American Mind. The reason I told him to put these two up here because I'm grumpy is one leads to the other. There's a quote by Voltaire: people who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. I heard Michael Malice talking about this the other day, that because he's an anarchist, he has no love lost for the police. And he was talking about the Canadian truck convoy protesters. And you have Canadian police going around confiscating firewood.
Sorry, I just hate giving up. So
yes,
while he's talking.
So you've got Canadian law enforcement going around confiscating firewood and fuel during the Canadian winter. And Michael Malice made the point, look, what's the difference between that and if you were ordered to disperse the crowd with fire, like firearms? If you were ordered to fire on that crowd, the same person that would go around confiscating fuel and wood during a frickin' Canadian winter are the same type of people who would open fire. Because what's the difference? One's just quicker, one's slower. What's the difference?
Well, not only that, there's follow-up to that. The Canadian Child Protective Service was talking about taking the children away from the truckers that are there.
They're to start a fight.
Yeah, they're trying to start a fight.
Yes.
And that's where we talked about this last time, because we talked about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
The arm in arm, and we're peaceful, and we're making it obvious that they are not, as they push us aside, stick the dogs on us, put fire hoses on us and everything. The Canadian truckers are following the Martin Luther King playbook. And we're seeing in real time the Canadian government following the playbook of the authorities at the time of the civil rights movement. Unfortunately, what we don't have now is a neutral media, because back in the 60s, the media still held to that, the thought of it was their job to not contradict, but confront the government
Yes.
on anything that is unjust or anything that is untrue or anything that is exploiting of the American people, and in this case, the Canadian people. When the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Channel, is in lockstep with the government, not because they're right, but because they have to. Just like our, yeah. Oh yeah, it's definitely the money. It's sad, but it is definitely the money. Well, look at all the crap going on with CNN right now. Holy crap. What a shit show. By the way, it's another limited hangout. Don't think that he got fired over his affair, because it wasn't an affair. There were two consenting adults and two people that spent a lot of time together. And she's actually kind of hot, so I don't blame him. And he seems like that kind of manly man. So I don't blame her. That's not the controversy. That was a sexual relationship between two consenting adults.
That was an excuse, is what that was.
That's don't look any further after we admit this one thing, because she also was tied to Andrew Cuomo camp. And there's a lot of already exposed text messages that they were helping him push his celebrity during that time when he was actually killing old people, which is that's the part they don't want you to look into, because they expose the one scandal.
Mm-hmm.
So when the media is in lockstep with the authorities, I'm curious to see how, I hate that I'm in a position where I can be curious to see about how this is going to work out, but I'm curious to see how it's going to work out with the truckers, because they're using the same playbook as the civil rights movement, and they're actually getting the same results.
And
They're getting the same results from the reaction, but they're not getting the same results from the coverage.
no, because that is where the difference is, because if the American public never would have seen those pictures of the dogs and the fire hoses, it wouldn't have mattered that these peaceful people had dogs and fire hoses turned on them. And it is a perfect illustration of what Malice was talking about, what Voltaire was talking about, because you can't do that to someone if you haven't bought into absurdities about those people that have stripped you of what we talked about last time, which was your empathy. Because you have to have totally bought into the absurdity that simply because of the melanin of this person's skin, this person who is dressed nice, is conversing with me like any other neighbor I would have, who lives in the same country, lives in the same county, does the same kind of things, goes to the same kind of church that I go to, but they're not a full human. They're not the same as me simply because of the color of their skin. So I can use grotesque amounts of violence against them that I wouldn't use on a white person. That's an absurdity. It is utterly absurd.
Trying to think where I want to go, because I had a couple thoughts while you were saying that and the route I want to go. So we go back to the difference between empathy and compassion. And the more we're talking, the more we watched that lady on okay, so background. So a little bit of background. So there was an Oxford debate on eating meat or not eating meat, veganism versus allowing meat into your diet. And the keynote speaker on the anti-meat side of the aisle was a lady that came up, and first of all, she never addressed anything from a health standpoint. Never, ever at all. There was never, ever a biological, physiological, or realistically scientific element to her debate. It was all about the patriarchy, misogyny, racism. What else was in there? Colonialism. But as I listened to that argument the first time I listened to it, and now that we're talking, it's the social sciences argument is actually designed to break up what we defined last time as compassion. Because compassion was a global want for others to do well, right? There was no definition of others. It was everyone. It wasn't everyone like me. It wasn't everyone who's not this. It was everyone no matter what. And if you really break down the social sciences with its hierarchies and its privilege groups and intersectionality, where this group is this way if it's this other thing too, and with that and everything else, and we still aren't going to define what is on top, because what is on top of that oppression hierarchy is what benefits our argument for this moment, right? There is no universal humanity. So compassion actually involves the liberal ideal of universal humanity. And that's still left-leaning when it comes down to it. And those of us that have that ideal need to be fighting against those that are trying to break that central thing. That's actually what I define liberalism as, is a wanting for the betterment of a universal humanity.
That's a good point, because to our civil rights analogy is it could not have worked. The strategy of Martin Luther King and that era of civil rights activists could not have worked if the majority of America had been inculcated in this sociological idea of hierarchies. Because, as I just talked about, the people who were committing the acts of violence, they had bought into the absurdities, which were nothing more than that same idea of hierarchies, but just mirror image of what we're talking about today. Really, that's all it was. It was just a mirror image. So the overwhelming majority of America hadn't bought into that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't live in those hierarchies. They didn't believe in those hierarchies. Even a lot of people in the South who weren't dealing with segregation and Jim Crow on a day-to-day basis didn't necessarily buy into that.
Well, and you look at the atrocities. Look at the atrocities to find actually what's inside someone's mind. This might be bannable. I don't know. So what was the underlying, and this was in the 1930s in Germany as well, with the Jews, but this was way back in the 16 and 1700s with the black slaves. One of the ideals that was put forward that this person was less than me was this inherent dirtiness, right? I'm going to just use the word dirtiness to imply a lot of other things. Unclean, right? It was a lesser person. They were unclean. Yes, they were human, but because of this trait about them, they were less worthy of respect to some degree. So we'll put the nicest terms on that. Less worthy of respect. This is a little bit of sexy time with Sam here, but I'm not going to put my dick in something that's unclean. Right? This video is getting banned. I'm not putting my dick in something that's unbanned. But Thomas Jefferson made babies with his slaves. Right? They didn't believe the rhetoric they were saying.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They didn't believe it because it wasn't true. And they knew it because they were smart people. But they needed to perpetuate something, right? Now, the fact that we're unconsciously perpetuating now is a different argument because we know what we believe. And belief has a lot of things that go into it. But for most of us, it's actually empirical data as well, right? And so we have to be able to separate what was happening then from what's happening now on the sheer basis of the fact that what we believe to be true is actually reality at this point. I don't know if I'm making my point very clear. I'm being a little bit abstract, but maybe.
No, that kind of leads into one of the random notes I had, and why I had the two books here is one leads to the other. It is the rhetoric of the woke aristocracy, not necessarily to your point of your separation of the different kinds of woke people.
Mhm.
What I would call the woke aristocracy, the people pushing it and the people in positions to benefit off of it, is what they're pushing actually what it's about? Or is it about seizing power?
Mm. Well, and therein lies the, I guess, the circle of the life of this this movement. The part of their underlying philosophy is everything is about power. Power is truth. And they need to have power for their truth to be truth. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. We've gone through the documents as we've the publications and everything. Power is truth. We hear all the time, speak truth to power, right? What they really mean by that is speak power to truth. We see this in misinformation labels. Oh crap, I meant to have this ready, but we kind of impromptu did this. There is a new Senate document for misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. Okay, so this is important, people in the audience, for what we do, because we've been through some crap with this stuff, right? With some banned videos and labels and everything. The definition of malinformation per this document, and I'll have it for the next time, so Heath, remind me to get that ready, is truthful information that can be used to cause violence.
Well, that's gonna, okay, so you better ban the Bible. You better ban the Quran.
Well, I'm thinking we'll go back to the revolution. Whoever reported on the Boston Massacre,
Yeah.
that person reported malinformation because a bunch of British soldiers shot a bunch of colonials, and the person who reported that helped spur what we now call the revolution, right? So that's malinformation, but it was the correct information. And so when we report something that's factually correct and it causes you to question your government, you are now spreading malinformation. Now, this is important. This is very important, especially other creators out there right now, that we need to actually hope this doesn't go through and actually do everything we can to make it not go through, because everything we've already put up puts us in the domestic terrorist So we're all subject to that. Any text you set out, if certain things happen where they can read your text, which they're already doing, those are all now in this category, because everything in this category now is under the YouTube banner of contradicting authority. Who's the authority? Well, those that have their own agenda that are in power right
I
now.
thought we were supposed to speak truth to power. I'm so confused.
Well, and that brings us back to the point that we were talking about. We're going to Saki it back. The media in line with the government.
It's fascism. That's what I was writing about a couple of weeks ago. Is
No. Quit throwing. We got to not. And this is where I think we do fight some. We got to resist the urge to throw out buzzwords.
well,
It's authoritarianism.
historically speaking,
Yes.
is what I'm talking about. Is yes, it is absolutely is authoritarianism, and it doesn't need to be. And this is what's so insidious about it, because you don't have the government passing a law that says you can't say these things because we have a First Amendment. Even in today's day and age, it would be really hard to keep that from getting, thrown out and people getting up in arms in it. So instead, what they do is you have Psaki going out there saying, well, the YouTube or the social media companies should really do something to crack down on these things. How the hell is that any different from you passing a law? I'll tell you how it's different. Is one, it's because we, the people, don't have a say through our representatives. So it's actually worse.
Well, and this is tough, because we, the people, we're so expansive right now. And this is what happened to the Roman Empire way back when. They got so big that it became unoperable.
Yeah.
And a lot of things play into that. The geography, information networks, differences amongst people. The fact that we are the most diverse country in the world, if you really think about it. I mean, name another country that has more diversity than we do. We are truly the melting pot. So when this is where we will have disagreements, because we talked about this last time when I said, is socialism the right answer or is capitalism the right answer? Well, it depends on what your population makeup is, right? If you're a collectivist society, socialism is going to be better. But you have to have a population that leans in that direction genetically and in nurture. Whereas the other way, if you're an independent, this is why I'm so actually confused by the way things are working out in Australia right now, because by all kind of indicating factors of what made up that population, they should be very individualistic as well.
Yeah.
Which I think is part of the problem. I think that's actually, the more I think about it out loud as we're talking, the government is authoritarian, but the people aren't, which is why we're seeing such a hammer down approach, because the people on top know that. So I'm thinking that thought out loud as we talk. Yeah, so they know the people aren't going to support certain things, so they just hammer down right away, which is smart. It's intelligent from the people on top, but I think it's going to be bloody in the end, which sucks.
Yeah.
Which sucks really bad, because there's a lot of cool people down there. But
well, it also sucks really bad because they're one of the bulwarks that keeps China from being China. China-ing it up as much as they would like to.
Yep, but China fits right into that mold of we're a collectivist society, right? This is actually my message for people on my side of the aisle politically, because you see a term go around, democratic socialism, right? And on paper, it sounds really good, and it actually could be amazing in a place where you have a collectivist makeup and to a large degree. So somewhere like China, if they were to convert from the authoritarian socialism to a democratic socialism, I think it actually would work very well. But when you take an individualistic area, which the United States is very individualistic, it doesn't work because you go against people's nature. And if you go too far against people's nature for too long, you're going to have an explosion of some sort. And so what works in one area may not work in another. So I like the sentiment. I don't like the placement.
It's why I've said that I think the best option for a legitimate third party that could have success is to revive the Federalist Party and make it mean what the word means,
which is not what the Federalist Society is doing.
No.
So that's kind of the taint on that.
Ignore the Federalist blog thing, whatever it is now, which I don't even know. But the idea that, look, what you're talking about could theoretically work in, say, a New England state, where you have smaller states, you have smaller geography, you have closer knit communities, so people are more communal. Something like that could work in one of those states. And so if that's what you want to do, fine, do that. But that ain't gonna work in Texas.
No, never in Texas.
That ain't gonna work in Wyoming. Okay. So why try and force it on them? And ultimately, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about using force to implement these ideas.
Which is, the founding fathers kind of really thought about that, because we do have some autonomy within the states. And realistically, it's the only thing that's kept us from being Canada right now. It really has, because we have the luxury of being in Texas. A friend of mine that he's a legal guy that I talk to a lot. He's in Florida, so we've kind of got this detachment from when it looks like to be in New York, or
it's two different countries right now. It's crazy.
Which, from a scientific standpoint, I wish that the federal government would just stand down and let the states do what they do, because then we can be gathering data.
Yes, the states are supposed to be laboratories of democracy, laboratories of politics, in the same way that, okay, so we've used Israel's data a lot because they for a long time had the best data. Britain had good data too, and so they had different approaches. Sweden had a different approach, so you can look at that. So you should be able to do the same thing with the states. Not just for any issue, to say, okay, well, this is what this policy is, and these are the results. And maybe it is that you would say, well, I'm willing to make this trade-off, because obviously from my bias, I'm gonna look at California and New York and say, you people are basket cases compared to, Texas or Florida when it comes to economic policy or education policy or whatever. But it may be that if you live there, you would counter with, well, I'm willing to make that trade-off because, XYZ. Fine, you do you.
Well, let's take a 5-minute pee break, and then let's go over COVID numbers on this argument. All right. Sorry for the hiccup there. We had to take a bathroom break, but we're going to kind of try to summarize everything, which is really tough for me because I had no direction going into the night.
That kind of wasn't, that was kind of the point, was just a ramble on what was on our mind. The biggest thing on my mind for me was that whether it's Rogan, whether it's this nonsensical Oxford Debating Society vegan lady, whatever, the ultimate point for all of them is it's not about what they say it's about. I mean, heck, even if something is nonsensical as we really need to make sure we post that video of the absurdity of it. And I understand the impulse of a lot of the people in that audience to laugh at the stuff she's saying because it is so absurd. But if you think about what she's saying and the radical language that she's using, if you really buy into what she's saying, there's no way you can do anything but use force,
Mhm.
potentially violence, to stop people from eating meat. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about people whose warped ideology leads them to want to use force to impose their will. And it is a never-ending slippery slope because they have no limiting principle.
Well, and that actually takes us all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, because I said there's this range where most people are in, and if you try to make any of the tails the norm, you have to use force against the other tail. So it's a common humanity that needs to prevail. And I think when we're talking about the slippery slope that we talked about earlier, when you get to a certain point, you've gone beyond the common humanity, and that needs to be supported. The stop at that point needs to be supported by all sides, whether you're left or right, because at that point, you are going to need to use force on the other 50% of the population to keep going down that slope. And where that's defined, we can debate about, right? On any issue, whether it's gender identity, whether it's abortion, or well, shoot, we talked about pedophilia. What's the legal age, right? That's something we can debate about. Is it 17? Is it 18? Is it 19?
It used to be 14 in Arkansas.
Yeah, is it 14? I've met 15-year-olds that were more mature than some 20-year-olds that I've met, right? So yeah, well, again, we got to take a point where we say it's you got a Darwin Award, right? But within a range, whether it should be 17 or 19 or something, for instance, is we can debate that, because where's the mean on maturity, right? Where's the mean versus the tails on that? And but the fact that grown men and women can prey upon children, we can all decide that that's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? The nuance of that conversation can go down a lot of roads, but still we can still agree on the fact that there is a certain point where it's just completely wrong no matter what. And I mean, I could go any way with that, because a 25-year-old male is going to have a power dynamic advantage over a 20-year-old female any day, because of brain development at that point, well, and career development at that point. But at the same time, in a 19-year-old man with a 17-year-old woman, well, that's a little different story. This is just one example. So, and then we talked about gay marriage. We talked about abortion. We had 2 episodes. So we've got about 3 hours of video on our discussion about abortion, on what is that line between what's acceptable and what's not. But we also both agreed that there is a range in there.
We used the example for the extremes of the frickin' previous Virginia governor talking about, well, if because he was a doctor, and well, if the baby survives the abortion, well, then we make it comfortable while we have a discussion with the mother about what she wants to do. Hold on a second, you're talking about post-birth abortion, okay? So this is someone who doesn't believe there's a line.
Mm-hmm.
That is radical, that is insane, that is absurd,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So how do you have a rational conversation with that person? But so first things first, we need to acknowledge that there are lines, and we need to then realize that what we're talking about here is where are those lines and why?
Yeah. So what's the black? What's the white? What's the gray? And we need to keep the debate within the gray is the problem. And I think to go way back to the beginning of this conversation, where people think Heath and I talk too much in alignment, even though we say one's left and one's right, is because we keep our debate within the gray. We both accept the fact that if you're black or white thinking, you're probably wrong on most things. There are obvious other things, but within the gray is where the debate should stay. Hey, that actually rhymes. That could be a tagline. That's the title of this episode. That is the title of episode 53. Within the gray is where the debate should stay.
I like it.
All right. Anything else you want to add before we call it a night? Yeah, we've been drinking to that, so hopefully this comes out coherent. The chili we're making for tomorrow smells delicious. Cincinnati is the chili. We got tacos.
You want to end on a prediction then, since that's what we're.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we're together because we're
Not
going
together. We're same space.
I mean, we're gay, but not gay like that. Gay, but no rainbows, you know.
I'm not happy. I'm never happy.
Okay,
So-
I'm gay, but no rainbows.
Super Bowl party tomorrow, and I'm in the opposition of I don't really care so much who wins. I'd be happy with either. Sometimes I'm in the position where I don't care because I hate both teams. I would be happy to see Stafford get the win, but I have a soft spot for the Bengals because I rooted for them back in the Boomer and Achy Woods days.
Yeah, well, and the Bengals 49ers Super Bowl was actually the first Super Bowl I've ever watched. 8 years old. 8 years old when that happened. But I am rooting for LA for two main reasons. First one, the kind of superficial reason is Matthew Stafford is a really great quarterback. I think he's kind of like a Dan Marino type quarterback who never really was able to go all the way through because there was just something about the front office that kept messing up his team. And now he's on a good team with a great coach, or on his way to being a great coach, I should say. With Aaron Donald, the best defensive lineman to ever play the game, in my opinion. A pretty good offensive line, great receiving core with the addition of Odell Beckham, with Cooper Kupp. And he finally has a chance to get that thing that was going to elude him the rest of his career as long as he was with the Lions. So there's that one. But then there's the other one. It's for those that have been paying attention, I have kind of a bias against domestic abuse. And where I draw the line on a lot of things is centered around abuse. And Cincinnati Bengals have a running back. He's their number one running back, Joe Mixon. And
What's this, like second year, third year?
Third year, I think. I think it's the third year, but either way, he's a young guy, very talented. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from him.
Whatever year they picked him.
Yeah. He was the number one running back pick that year. And he's amazing talent-wise. But when he was at OU, he beat the crap out of his girlfriend at the time. And was I think he was actually went to jail for it.
I don't know the story, so that helps me. That helps my Bengalsness. I don't know the story. I just know he's a piece of work.
Well, it goes further than this because, I'm never been a Chiefs fan, but I was rooting for the Chiefs when they played the Cincinnati Bengals because when Kareem Hunt beat the crap out of a girl, they dropped him like a bad habit.
Yeah, he was good.
And he was
Really good.
he was at the time he was the best running back in the league.
Yeah, they had some real triplets there with Mahomes, him, and then Tyreek Hill
Mm-hmm.
as their number one wide receiver. And And they got rid of one of the legs of that stool because.
But they dropped him like a bad habit, and that tells me the front office cares about integrity a little bit more than talent. Now they still care about talent, obviously, but if there's something glaring, they're gonna, their gray area errs to the side of good, right? Whereas Cincinnati drafted Mixon, they drafted him very high. They pay him a whole lot of money to do what he does. Well, he got reinstated to OU, which also is another reason, even though we're Oklahoma State fans, which is enough reason to hate OU. But another reason to hate OU is because the fact that the front office has this one glaring weakness. We want to win no matter what. I don't care. We want to win.
The ends justify the means.
Yeah, we'll blow up the whole village, kill all the babies to kill that one person that's a bad guy, right? It's this mentality. And Joe Mixon beat the crap out of his girlfriend. It was caught on camera. I believe he went to jail for it. He was suspended from the NCAA, and OU brought him back his senior year. And I was watching the game he came back on. And in the game he came back on, he railed off like a 50-something yard touchdown run. Great. The announcers the whole time were talking about, oh, this is redemption. He's so he's remorseful and all of these things. After he rails off this 50 some odd yard run, the announcers were trying to band-aid the situation, but he goes to the sideline and about 10 other guys join him in a circle and they start going like they're beating the crap out of somebody as their celebration dance. And I said, this guy doesn't give a about anything. He knows he's going to the NFL. He knows he got away with what he did. And he's throwing it in the face of everybody. And I feel for these announcers because they had this script they were supposed to talk about with him because he was the next big thing. And he was just putting it in everybody's face that I'm back. I'm me.
Part of your real frustration is the fakeness, the hypocrisy of it all. Because remember when the Rick Rice video first came out? That's when the NFL tried to go all in. That was their George Floyd moment for, violence against women. That was their moment for that. And they went all in. And I don't remember who I heard say this, but I heard somebody say, why the hell are they showing us commercials about violence against women? Shouldn't they be playing that in the locker room? I'm not the problem here.
Well, my first thought was this should have been taken care of in the locker room.
Yes.
All of these so-called men.
It's like the Weinstein thing. Where were the actual men? Because a real man would have said, hell no.
Oh, man. We were going to close this out, but I got another story.
Oh, dear.
Oh, okay. So I got a client, his daughter's at A&M right now. And she rents a house out with her roommate. And they came home from, of course, they're 20 years old. So they're not 21 yet. So they came home from drinking all night in Northgate. And there was someone in their house. Some guy, some dude upstairs. So they went down the street to their guy friend's house. And 2 hours later, they called their other roommates. It's a very complicated story, but they called their other roommates to tell them, hey, there's someone in the house, don't go in. And then another hour later, they all call the cops and the cops go out there, but the guy had left and was gone. And so nobody knows who it was. And I'm like, wait, there's a disconnect in this whole story. You went to your guy friend's house.
Yeah. And then they went over there and took care of business, right?
Yeah, they went over there and made sure everything was good for you, right?
Yeah, that's not where the story was going.
That's not where the story went. The guy friends just provided a house for them this whole time until it was okay for them to go home. And I'm just like, what's happened? What, at the very least, you call the cops right then, and the guy friends go over there.
It's part of the fakeness because you're not being instilled with actual masculinity. You're being instilled with fake masculinity and it's the unjustified means. It's the same fake crap that we were ranting about this whole episode of, is what you're saying really what you're saying? Or is this all about power? For the NFL, it's about power, position, and money, money, money.
The problem is, though, that works at that level, but it jacks everything up at the lower levels.
Yes.
Because these guys should have had a different drive about them.
Yeah. So the NFL, the shield, as they like to call it, it's protected because it has established such a place of passion and such a market share within the sports culture as a whole that they're protected. They can be fake and be fine, but the ramifications to people like Nixon's poor girlfriend, or who the hell cares? We made ours. We're still gonna have a huge year.
Well, and because that's back to my who I want to win. The front office turned a blind eye to that because it was not only did he do it, it was very obvious that he had no reformation. He was not reformed in any way, internally or externally or anything. So he was not reformed in any way, and it was obvious. And they turned a blind eye to that because he was good.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good players out there. And from what I understand about the Rams organization, they actually care about that. And that's why I want the Rams to win, even though it's hard to root for a California team as a Texan. But
the only California team I can stomach is the Dodgers, but that's because of their history with Brooklyn.
So yeah, that's where I'm going with that. As usual with Super Bowl parties, my main thing is good food, good fun.
Yeah. Hopefully a good game, not like that terrible. Was it the Broncos Seahawks? It was such a freaking disappointment. It was like that first Peyton games with the Broncos.
Yeah,
it's probably the worst one in recent memory. Of just
it's not like the Bills, Cowboys 72 to, and it would have been worse had Leon Lett not been an idiot.
So I have a hard time calling this game though because I'm conflicted. So my prediction is actually going to be two predictions because my head says the Bengals, Burrow is the most sacked quarterback I know in the playoffs, I think the whole year. And you already mentioned Donald, possibly the best.
Well, and Von Miller, and he is,
so
he got sacked 9 times in the Titans game.
Yeah.
And they still won that game. But the Titans defensive line is nothing compared to LA's defensive line.
Intellectually, I look at this and I go, the Bengals are going to lose by like 17 points. But emotionally, you look at the kind of Cinderella run the Bengals have been on, not just in the playoffs, but in the last several games of the season. And my heart says, okay, well, yeah, they're going to lose by 17 points. But I still think they're going to win by 2 on a last-second field goal.
Well, here's what the Bengals got going for them. So they're playing LA at home, which is against them, right? LA is projected because of those measurables to win by Vegas odds. I think it's 4.5. So if you bet on LA, you have to bet $450 to win $100, right? So Vegas is way against Cincinnati, but Cincinnati does have a really good defense. And the thing that defense does for you is exactly how the Green Bay game went with San Francisco.
Yep.
Is the weather and San Francisco's defense kept that game within a touchdown.
Yep.
Right. So even though Green Bay was the better team for 3.5 quarters, because the game was within a touchdown, one good play changed the game. Deebo Samuel took it all the way down and scored that touchdown. And tied it up, and then it ended up going down for the last second field goal. So defense will, they say defense wins championships. No, defense keeps you in every game you're in.
Yes.
And so
So like the Chiefs game, they were losing, but the defense kept it from being a rout.
yeah. Yeah, they regrouped and they ended up stopping the Chiefs for 3 more quarters after that first quarter that looked like the Chiefs were just going to run away with the whole thing. Well, I guess it was almost the first half. They stopped them on the goal line at the end of the half.
Yeah.
And because they stopped them there and prevented that score, that kept the game within reach. And if it's within reach, all it takes is a little bit of somebody doing the right thing on the other side of the ball. Now, where I think LA comes away with this is that defensive line, because you need that little bit of something on the other way. And if Burrow's on his back all day long, not only is it going to get in his head, so like psychologically, it's just going to, he may end up hurt by the first half.
So do you have are you going to decide for me? Is it the Bengals win by 2 on a last second field goal, or they get stomped by 17 plus, or do you think it's somewhere in the middle?
I'm going to say, I'm going to say somewhere in the middle. I'm going to say it's going to be obvious, but not 17 plus.
Okay.
I'm going to maybe a 10-point game.
The Rams are in control pretty much the whole game, but the Bengals are never completely out of it.
Well, it depends on the coin flip in the beginning. I think the Bengals in the beginning can come out with some crazy stuff. And the guy I was talking trash about earlier, Mixon, he is an extremely talented player, which is why you would hope somebody could get their life in line, right? Because he has all this gift that he's squandering realistically from a moralistic standard. But it's Burrow is unpredictable, and he's almost as magical as Mahomes in some situations. He can dance, man. And he's got that outlet in Mixon. So that keeps the pass rush off you for a little bit. So I think they take advantage of that. And if they can come out and score early, I think it's a game for about 3 quarters. But I think LA just has too much depth in comparison to Cincinnati that after that 3-quarter mark, they just pull away and it just seems like something just barely out of reach, where maybe Cincinnati will come and score and make it a 1-score game, and then LA scores again, so it depends on the coin flip. If LA gets the coin flip in the beginning and they come down and score, I think it stays that way the whole game. But I think if Cincinnati gets the ball first and comes up with some magic right in the beginning, then it's a game until that kind of halfway through the 3rd quarter moment where LA just starts to pull away.
Yeah.
So I think it's something in the middle, but I think it ultimately is decided by the 3rd quarter.
All right, well, we will find out tomorrow, and then we'll see you all next time we see you.
Awesome. Great. Talk to y'all later, folks.